John Mieremet was born in Amsterdam in 1960, a city known for its canals, bikes, and culture, but also its dark underbelly. He came from a working-class neighborhood, a place where money was always tight, and the streets were a school of survival. For young boys like John, toughness wasn't optional. It was the price of respect. Even as a teenager, John stood out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and strong. He didn't shy away from fights. In fact, he often started them. Where other boys might hesitate, John would throw the first punch. That reputation of a boy who didn't back down was his first currency in a world where fear could be more valuable than money. By his late teens, John had gone beyond schoolyard brawls. He started running errands for older criminals, carrying packages, guarding doors, collecting debts. These jobs were small, but they came with big lessons. Loyalty mattered, money spoke louder than words, and violence was a language everyone understood. In the 1980s, John met Sam Klepper, another ambitious young man from Amsterdam. The two clicked immediately. They were smart, ruthless, and fiercely loyal to each other. Together, they formed a partnership that would become legendary. Soon, people in the underworld were calling them Spic and Span, a nickname that reflected their clean, professional image. They were always well-dressed, always precise, and always deadly serious about business. At first, they worked on small-time rackets, extortion, protection schemes, debt collection, but they didn't stay small for long. By the mid-80s, John and Sam had graduated to more lucrative crimes, drug trafficking and large-scale smuggling operations. They built a reputation not just for making money, but for enforcing their deals with brutal efficiency. If someone refused to pay, John and Sam would make sure everyone in Amsterdam knew what happened next. They didn't just demand respect, they created fear. Their rise brought them into the orbit of Klaas Bruinsma, one of the most powerful drug lords the Netherlands had ever seen. Bruinsma's empire controlled much of the hashish trade coming into Europe. Working with him gave John and Sam access to smuggling routes, trusted contacts, and piles of money. But it also painted a target on their backs. In the Dutch underworld, alliances were temporary, and trust was fragile. By the early 1990s, John Mieremet was no longer just a street tough. He was a wealthy man. He wore tailored suits, drove luxury cars, and bought homes. But wealth in the underworld always came with a price. Every new deal meant new rivals, and betrayal was never far away. In 1991, that fragile balance shattered. Klaas Bruinsma was murdered outside the Hilton Hotel in Amsterdam. His death plunged the city's criminal world into chaos. Gangs scrambled to claim pieces of his empire. John and Sam fought to hold their position, but the wars that followed were bloody. During this period, John's reputation hardened. He became known as the more violent half of Spic and Span, the man who would not hesitate to pull the trigger. This made people respect him, but it also made him a marked man. Police had been watching John for years. They bugged phones, followed his movements, tried to build cases against him. But John was careful. He rarely left evidence, and witnesses were too afraid to speak against him. He was, for a time, untouchable. By the mid-1990s, the streets of Amsterdam were running red with blood. Many of John's rivals were killed. Newspapers began to portray John and Sam as the faces of a new, more ruthless underworld. Then came a turning point. John survived an assassination attempt. Gunmen opened fire on him, but he walked away alive. From that day forward, John lived like a man who knew his clock was ticking. Through it all, Sam Klepper remained by his side. The two shared everything: money, power, enemies. To many, they seemed unstoppable. But in 2000, everything changed. One morning, Sam Klepper was gunned down outside his home in Amsterdam. The killing shocked the underworld. For John, it was devastating. This was not just his business partner. This was his closest friend, his ally, the man he trusted above all others. Sam's murder changed John. He became more paranoid, more vocal, and more dangerous. He no longer trusted anyone. He accused rival gangsters, corrupt lawyers, and even politicians of plotting against him. Unlike most criminals, John didn't stay silent. He went to the press, giving interviews where he named names and spoke openly about corruption. He claimed there was a secret plan to eliminate old gangsters like him, a conspiracy to clean up the underworld by killing off its biggest players. To some, John sounded like a whistleblower. To others, he sounded desperate. Either way, his words made him more dangerous, to himself and to the people he accused. In an attempt to escape the violence of Amsterdam, John began spending more time abroad. He went to Spain, Belgium, and eventually Thailand. But no matter where he went, his past followed him. He was still involved in money laundering and drug deals, still moving pieces across Europe. Even in Thailand, John lived like a hunted man. He hired bodyguards, avoided public places, and constantly looked over his shoulder. The threats never stopped. His enemies were patient, and many of them had been waiting years for revenge. By 2005, John was aging and worn down. He still had power, still had money, but the fire that had once made him unstoppable had begun to fade. He missed the days when he and Sam ruled together. On November 2nd, 2005, John left a lawyer's office in Pattaya, Thailand. It was supposed to be a routine meeting. But as he walked outside, two gunmen on a motorcycle drove past and opened fire. John was hit multiple times and died instantly. News of his murder traveled fast. In Amsterdam, the underworld took notice. John's death, though expected by many, still sent a shockwave through the city. The killers were never officially caught. Rumors swirled. Some blamed rival gangsters. Others whispered that corrupt officials had finally silenced him. Whatever the truth, the message was clear. Even the most feared men could fall. With Sam dead in 2000 and John killed in 2005, the legendary duo of Spic and Span was gone forever. Their deaths marked the end of an era in the Amsterdam underworld. For other gangsters, it was a warning. Many lowered their profiles, becoming less visible. The streets learned a lesson. No one was untouchable. Behind the headlines, John left behind a family who had to live with his legacy. A legacy of fear, violence, and tragedy. Today, John Mieremet remains a controversial figure. To some, he was nothing more than a ruthless criminal, a man who chose a life of violence and paid the ultimate price. To others, he was a symbol of Amsterdam's bloody past, a reminder of a time when gang wars ruled the streets. His life was a testament to one simple truth. Living by the gun usually ends with dying by the gun. Money, power, and fear gave John Mieremet influence, but they could never give him safety. Even now, years after his death, his story still lingers in Amsterdam's criminal history. It serves as both a warning and a legend. The tale of a man who rose from the streets to rule them, only to be brought down by the very world he helped create.